Hi reception, here's our story of the week, The Princess and the Giant. And I've picked it because it talks about other fairy tales. I wonder if you'll recognise them. And because of the giant who lives at the top of the beanstalk that we know from a fairy tale, The Princess and the Giant. A little princess lived inside a little tiny house. Her servant was a tabby cat, her butler was a mouse. Her father made the porridge and her mother chopped the wood. And Princess Sophie rode her bike like every princess should. In the yard behind the shed a magic beanstalk grew. A giant lived right at the top, as giants often do. At night the giant's stomping made the people sob and shake. That selfish giant, Sophie scowled, he's keeping me awake. The princess asked her parents, "Why are giants mean and bad?" "Always have been," said her mother. "Always will be," said her dad. He found the book of fairy tales they kept high on a shelf. It says so here in black and white. Look, read it for yourself. So Sophie read a story set in murky days of old, when Jack climbed up a beanstalk and discovered piles of gold. A giant roared, "Get off my stuff, I'll grind your bones for bread. I'll fee, fi, fo and fum, and then I'll bop you on the head." That night poor Sophie tossed and turned. Our giant's such a pest. If only he would go to sleep, we might all get some rest. She read about a witch who made a house from gingerbread. It made her tummy rumble and a plan formed in her head. Wonder if you know what these two fairy tales are that they're talking about. At midnight, Princess Sophie took some bottles and some packets. She piled them in her backpack, then she buttoned up her jacket. She clambered up the beanstalk. Brave Sophie didn't stop till she reached the giant's castle that was balanced on the top. Suddenly the giant roared, "Who's creeping round outside? A nasty little robber? Well, you'd better run and hide." "I'm Sophie," said the princess. She was quivering with fright. "I've brought you a delicious snack to help you sleep at night." She cooked some lovely porridge in her father's porridge pot. "Now this should help you get to sleep. It's creamy, sweet and hot." The giant growled, "This supper wouldn't even feed a fly." But he ate the porridge anyway, then slammed the door. "Goodbye." The giant's roars got louder. Sophie ran back home to bed. She hugged her favourite teddy bear. "I'm glad you're here," she said. She read about a little girl who met 3 hungry bears and wondered whether giants ever felt alone or scared. All day long the giant howled, the people ran and hid. But Sophie had another plan, so this is what she did. She clambered up the beanstalk. Brave Sophie didn't stop till she reached the giant's castle that was balanced on the top. The giant bellowed, "Fee, fi, fo, what is that funny smell? A horrid little girl has come to trick me, I can tell." "It's only me," said Sophie as she held her backpack tight. "I've brought some cuddly bears, in case you're lonely in the night." Then Sophie made the supper while the giant sulked and huffed. "Us giants don't need teddy bears. We're strong and brave and tough." But he gobbled up his porridge and drank his milk and honey. Then he took the biggest bear to bed and squeezed its furry tummy. But still the giant couldn't sleep. The king cried, "Oh my word! He's making the most dreadful noise that I have ever heard." Sophie hugged him tightly. Daddy, don't be angry, please. He might be like the poor princess whose bed was full of peas. That's another fairy tale, The Princess and the Pea. The king and queen were in despair, so Sophie filled a sack. She dragged it to the garden and heaved it on her back. She clambered up the beanstalk, brave Sophie didn't stop, till she reached the giant's castle that was balanced on the top. The giant called, "Fee, fi, fo, oh, it's you again, I see. I suppose you'd better come inside and have a cup of tea." "I have the answer," Sophie cried. "I know why you're so grumpy. You can't get any sleep because your bed's too hard and lumpy." She pulled a mattress from the sack and heaved it on the bed. She gave the giant blankets and a pillow for his head. The giant ate his supper, then he gathered up his bears, and he went to bed while Sophie tiptoed down the castle stairs. But the giant didn't sleep at all and soon was in a rage. The queen cried, "Send the army now to lock him in a cage." Sophie looked up from her book. She tried her very best. "There's nothing more that I can do," the princess sighed. "Unless—" Sophie grabbed her backpack and she scrambled through the door. "I can't imagine why I never thought of this before." She raced back up the beanstalk, brave Sophie didn't stop, till she reached the giant's castle that was balanced on the top. "Stop that racket," Sophie yelled, "and get back into bed." The giant was so stunned and shocked he did as Sophie said. "This has to work," thought Sophie, as she tucked his teddies in, and she pulled the softest blanket up around the giant's chin. The troops swarmed up the beanstalk and were ready for a fight, when they heard a sweet and gentle voice that drifted through the night. "Are you sitting comfortably?" they heard the young voice say. The soldiers stopped to listen and they put their swords away. Inside the castle, Sophie smiled. "Oh, how could I forget? You haven't had a story. No wonder you're upset." She pulled the book out from her bag and read a bedtime story. The giant and the soldiers were soon fast asleep and snory. "I think I've done it," Sophie gasped. "Our problems are no more." The poor old giant couldn't sleep. Now listen to him snore. He's eaten up his supper and he has some bears to hug. I've read a lovely story. Now he's happy, warm and snug. To celebrate the happy news, the king announced a feast. They danced and partied all night long, till 10 o'clock at least. But as the people wandered home with party bags and cake, there came a dreadful thud, thud, thud that made the whole world shake. "The giant's coming!" screamed a boy. "Quick, everybody hide! He's going to make a giant pie and bake us all inside." "Fee, fi, fo," the giant roared. The king and queen turned pale. "Bring me Princess Sophie now. I want a fairy tale." The people stopped their panicking. They gasped in disbelief. "Another story?" Sophie smiled. "Well, that's a big relief." "But why not read one by yourself?" she asked her giant friend. "Just start at the beginning and keep going to the end." "Oh, don't be silly, Sophie," said the giant with a giggle. "My books aren't filled with stories, they're just full of tiny squiggles." "Those marks aren't squiggles," Sophie said. "They're words. We call it writing. This writing tells us stories that are funny and exciting." Sophie took the giant's hand. "I'll teach you how to read. But first I need the army's help. There's something that I need. She sent the giant home to bed, then rubbed her sleepy eyes. The next time that we meet, she yawned, you'll have a big surprise. The soldiers made a storybook. The words were big and bold. Inside they wrote the most amazing stories ever told. Then Sophie taught her friend to read by walking on the lines. And the giant read his giant book, one word at a time. And it says, once upon a time there was a magic beanstalk. From that day forward, Sophie saw the giant every day. Sometimes they took turns to read, and sometimes they'd just play. The town was filled with joyful song and happy children's laughter. And the princess and the giant both lived happy ever after. The end. And I like that story. So that was The Princess and the Giant.